So my perspective on the whole thing is actually set yourself up the other way so that you have the team, the track record to prove that you can do the deals. Go get the investors to back you and then make it apparent to the market that you can close and you will get deals like you've never seen.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying this show and getting some great value for your investing needs, let us hear about it. Leave us that rating and review. Give us some honest feedback. It helps us, and it also helps other listeners find this show. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Marcin Drozdz. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Marcin Drozdz started investing in 2006 and has raised over $100 million in private capital, in addition to securing another 9 figures in capital commitments from institutional investors. Now, in the aftermath of the 2008 market crash, he and his team raised an 8-figure fund and acquired commercial properties in the U.S. Let's welcome to the show the founder of M1 Real Capital, Mr. Marcin Drozdz.
Hello, sir. Good to be here. Appreciate the introduction.
Absolutely. Listen, it's great to have you on the show today. I went over your bio at a very, very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Huh. Sure, I'd love to. I started out like so many people, read Rich Dad Poor Dad, thought it was a good idea. Read it in high school, between lunch breaks and everything else. Bought my first property when I was 20 or 21. Ended up talking my way into a private equity firm when I was 22 or 23, and that was a sales process in of itself. But went from buying single family homes to looking at 300 unit apartment buildings. Did that for a few years. Ended up raising a fair bit of money, about 25 million in equity for that firm in the first 2 years. Which bought a lot of real estate, which was fantastic. Beyond that, I broke out on my own. Started a 8-figure equity fund in 2011, I think it was. By 20, and 8 figures, you're like, oh man, we raised tens of millions of dollars, and you think it's a lot. Well, it's gone like that. Like you spend it, right? You invest it, pardon me, you spend it very quickly. And my only regret from then was I didn't do a 9-figure fund because the values from 2011, 2012, they just went nuts. Even in today's prices, it's still nothing compared to what it was then. So did that. Then we ended up doing a bunch of capital raises outside of real estate, a few different operating businesses, well into 9 figures in private capital. And then really decided to just kind of stay focused on the multifamily real estate stuff. So bought a few buildings since then, and just kind of waiting in the weeds to see what happens next with the market, with the interest rates, and where the opportunity is going to be now.
I love it, man. You talked about one, like many people, you read that Rich Dad Poor Dad book while you were in high
Yeah.
school and kind of planted that seed shortly after you made that first investment in, the residential side, building up that smaller portfolio. And then you mentioned that you talked your way into a private equity firm. And from there, you were raising $25 million for some of these deals and ultimately ended up scaling to the point where you left, created your own company, launched your own fund, 8-figure fund to invest in these real estate projects and then eventually continue to grow and scale from there. I want to rewind the clock back, right? Because, when you talk about working at a PE firm and then being able to launch your own private equity fund, makes a lot of sense. And some people may say, oh, okay, well, yeah, easy for you to do that. That this seems like, a natural transition. But you mentioned that you talked your way into a private equity firm, right?
I
So
didn't belong. I didn't belong there. I didn't have a law
how did you get in,
degree.
man? Like what does that look like? How do you just walk
I
up and
just
get your foot in the door there?
no. You look. Uh, there's only three things you can add value to in real estate in any business. Okay, you got to find the money, find the deal, or manage it. Right. Those are the three things that exist. Right. So When I was in school, I knew that inherently I did not want to manage. I didn't want to be the manager. I know how to manage things. It's just not my preferred state. And then it was a question of, do I want to learn how to find the deal, or do I want to learn how to find money? And I realized that the people that ultimately had the most leverage were the ones that could find the dough. And bonus points if you could find the dough before the actual deal, because then you're on fire. Like, he who has the gold makes the rules. So at an early age, I realized that I wanted to learn how to find the gold. So where was the gold? The gold is in the private equity firm. So I was willing to do anything. I literally moved across the country. I was willing to work for free. Actually, for the first few months, I didn't even ask for a paycheck. I didn't actually. I wasn't even on the payroll for the first 2, 3 months, and I didn't want to tell anybody in case they made a mistake. Because I didn't want them to be like, oh yeah, no, we don't need you anymore. So my goal was to get in there, ingrain myself into the business as quickly as I could, and make myself indispensable. And then after I think 2 or 3 months, I was finally like, hey, like, am I still getting paid? They're like, we haven't paid you yet. I'm like, no, we haven't. And so then because it was a fast growing company and I didn't care, I just wanted to be in the game. Right. So and how did I get in? I mean, I didn't have the qualifications. I didn't have the university education. I didn't have the college background that they needed. I didn't have the pedigree. I wasn't anybody's kid. I had a great attitude. I was willing to do whatever it took. And I picked up the stacks. I made phone calls to people nobody else wanted to call. I set up meetings that, nobody else really wanted to be involved with. I just did what was required to be in the room.
Man, I love it, right? You talked about not having the background, not having the pedigree. Like, there's nothing on
None
your
of it.
resume that says, "Yeah, let's hire this guy to be, at this private equity group," right? But it was a
None
growing
of it.
company, and you were willing to do things that other people weren't willing to do. And I think that attitude just goes to show that there's more opportunity than people give themselves credit for, right? Like, the
John,
mindset
literally,
is so important.
they said no. So I said, well, too bad, because I'm driving across the country anyway. So I'm coming.
So
And
they
the guy
said no.
just asked
You applied. They said
me,
no. You said I'm
they
coming anyway.
yeah, I'm coming anyway. I'm showing up. Like I'm coming. Like I'm coming. I'll just sit at the door, and eventually I'll carry some coffee for somebody. I don't know. We'll figure it out. And eventually they're just like, they didn't take me seriously, but like 10 days later, 12 days later, I drove across the country, sold all my stuff, moved across the country, and I did it. I showed up, and I literally didn't know if they were going to let me in or not. But they kind of, and I walked in, and it was a fast growing business, and there's lots of boxes and people and stuff moving and all that stuff, and I just started acting like I belonged there. So initially, everybody just kind of assumed that I was there, and it just kind of, I just stayed. And
And
I
nobody called
don't get
security
me
on
wrong,
you.
I had to add a lot of value. You can't just show up and be dead weight. Like, I added a lot of value immediately, and as best as I could. I read documents. Remember Ask Jeeves before you had Google search
Yeah.
and all this
Yep.
stuff. So I'm sitting at my desk at night asking Jeeves like what this document is, and Jeeves don't know anything either. You know what I mean? So it's just like, go to the library, you're pulling up old like documents, and we're so blessed today with the internet. But even like, this was 20 years ago, so the internet was kind of it was there, but it wasn't as robust as it. There was no chat GPT. I couldn't just ask it what this thing is, right? So you're grinding, and people are expecting you to know what's up because they think that you're there with them on the same premise. So that was my whole point. Is there's no excuse. Like, if you it was Tony Robbins say, it's not a lack of resources, it's a lack of resourcefulness, right?
Yeah.
So I
Absolutely.
knew I needed to be in the room. I needed to figure out how.
So I gotta ask. So when did you get hired? Like, when were you actually an official employee? Was it that day one where you showed up, or was it the two
two
months
months
later
later
when you asked about a
two
paycheck?
months later 2 months
So you
later
worked two months not really being an employee there.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
100%.
That's
100%.
crazy.
So I don't know if I've said this on a podcast, but I literally ran out of dough in the second month. And for the last week, before they started paying me, I was living in the car. Like, I literally slept in my car. And I got a gym membership just so I could go shower in the morning. You know what I mean? And it was just, but look, I'm not advocating this to people in their 40s and 50s with kids and responsibilities. I'm not saying any of that. But if you're 20, 22, 23, just go for it, man. Just go. Like, what are you going to do?
Man, I love it. There's so much there, when we talk about how to take advantage of what you have, right? You didn't have a lot of money, you didn't even have a lot of knowledge at that point, but you had time. You were
Yeah,
resourceful. You sold all your stuff, you moved across the country, and you decided this was the opportunity. I just think there's so much to learn from that, right? Just you got to be all in, you got to commit, and you can't really take no for an answer. There's a book that I love. It's a book that I read in college. It is, sorry, I'm looking up on my bookshelf there. It's How to Sell Yourself by a guy named Joe Girard, and Joe Girard is the world's greatest car salesman.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, I remember Joe.
there's a story in the book where he talks about a guy who went down to the shipyards to look for a job, and every week they come out and they tell the guys, hey, there are no jobs. Everyone leaves, and this guy stays, and every week he comes back, and they keep telling the guy, hey, there are no jobs, and this goes on for about 6 weeks, and this guy is still there bright and early, first one there, last one to leave, and then after 6 weeks, they tell everyone, hey, there are no jobs. They tell him, they point to him and say, you come here, come with us, and they end up hiring him. They make a job for him, right? This guy's just so
Yeah,
resilient. They make a job for him. And that's what you're getting at is that, the beauty in the finance world, commercial real estate, the rules are the rules are very loose, right? Meaning
hmm,
that you can create opportunities, but you have to have a mindset of creation, right? You got to be willing to do a little bit more, outwork some of these guys. And to your point, you got your foot in the door by being kind of creative and showing
yeah,
up and selling your stuff and driving, but you still had to do work when you got there, right? You still had to shine and stand out when you got there. Otherwise, they would have said, we didn't hire this dude, get him out of here, call security, right?
yeah,
And that didn't happen to
yeah.
you. So I think that just goes to show that if you are resourceful, opportunities kind of, come up and create themselves for you.
Oh,
So I appreciate you
100%.
sharing that story.
John, one of my first hires, I got to tell you a quick side story. So culturally, within my companies now, because the story is so abundantly clear of my coming up, so to speak, I've literally hired people where I was out casually with a few friends, and there was a young guy at the time. He was maybe 19 years old, and he was just such a keener. And I'm, whatever, few years his senior at the time. And he goes, "Can I come work with you guys?" And I made a joke. I said, "Well, I asked him, I go, so what do you know how to do?" And he was installing pools or something at the time. And so I made the comment, I go, "Yeah, I mean, you can come by the office and paint the office, I guess, like that." Like that's, and I was kind of like just politely trying to end that discussion because I didn't think he had any interchangeable skills historically. And I was correct. But here's the crazy thing. Monday morning, the kid shows up with a paintbrush to the office to paint. So I look at my partner at the time. I'm like, "Oh, well, let's go to Home Depot. Let's get him some paint." So he stuck around. He painted the office. Then he did some other stuff. He's been working with me for over a decade now. He makes very, very, very good money, and he is one of my top guys in our private equity firm.
I
And he
love it.
started out just rocking a paintbrush. So that's like resourcefulness is more important than having resources.
I love it, man. So let's transition. I think this is a great place to kind of transition the conversation a little bit, right? So you talked about resourcefulness is more important than having resources. One of the things that stops so many would-be multifamily investors today is a lack of deals and also a lack of capital. So let's talk about the deal flow first, and then I want to talk more about capital. But when it comes to a lack of deal, and obviously it takes two to tango when it comes to kind of creating a deal, what are some things investors can do to stand out, to see more deals, and ultimately structure more opportunities that can work for them?
So I'm going to give you probably a controversial perspective on this. I actually think if you want the deals, you got to have the money first. So literally go get the money, go get the commitments. And again, do it legally, compliantly, SEC compliance, all this stuff. Make sure you got your ducks in a row, but get the money first because when you have the money, people will bring you deals. There's no shortage of deal flow out there. There's just a shortage of people having confidence in your ability to close those deals. So people of any value, of the people that value their time at thousands or tens of thousands of dollars per hour, will not bring you deals that they're not confident you can close. That they're just not going to do it. Like I get my inbox is blown up now with, "Hey, just take over this debt. Hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do it?" Like, things that were trading for 15, $20 million for 30, 40, 50% off what they just traded for 2, 3 years ago. And I'm getting this deal flow spoon fed to me. I've got brokers coming and like saying, "Hey, so theoretically the bank's willing to do," like they're bringing me the deal and they're negotiating it for me with the hopes that I'll step in to like some predetermined thing because I've already done the hardest part, which is actually find the dough. So my thought process is opposite. There's a lot of people out there that'll tell you, yeah, you can do creative financing, you can do sub two, you can do all these things, and that's fantastic. And sure, if you have a hammer in your tool belt, then everything looks like a nail. But the problem is, not all deals are going to fit that parameter. So I would much rather have a huge war chest of cash ready to go so that those deals, and then make it known to the public that we have the dough. So people will bring you deals. And you're going to say no to a lot of stuff because there's a lot of crap out there, but they will bring you a lot of things because you can close quickly. So my perspective on the whole thing is actually set yourself up the other way so that you have the team, the track record to prove that you can do the deals. Go get the investors to back you. And there's tons of legal ways to do this. And then make it apparent to the market that you can close and you will get deals like you've never seen.
So based on that comment, what do you feel about the old saying that if you find the deal, the money will come?
I think the people that say that are the ones selling you courses to learn how to do real estate because they want to conveniently overlook the actual hardest part of the equation, which is he who has the money makes the rules.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know who originated that idea and coined that phrase, but it's one that always bothers me for so many reasons. And one I try to tell people is, you know, what's a deal, right? What's a deal to you may not be a deal to me. So if you go
Yeah.
out there and find a quote unquote deal and then you expect the money to show up, you might be highly disappointed, right? And then to your point, if you already know what people are
Ye-
looking for, now you got a shopping list, right? They're going to tell you, hey, yeah, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the money. You find this kind of deal, I'll put, X amount of capital down. Okay, great. Now you can go out there and find it. You know exactly what a deal looks like. But, to your point, having those commitments, understanding, that range of where you can go, I think it gives you confidence too as an investor, right? You're not in the back of your head, you're not sitting there worrying about, well, can I actually raise the money for this or will people invest in this? And I do think it makes a lot of sense to find the money first. So it's great to hear you say that. And I hope our listeners really understand that perspective where you're coming from because it can be a great pivot shift and also gives you a lot more power in working with brokers and working in this industry if you already have the capital committed for these deals. So let's talk about that, right? So getting the capital, if we're focused on getting the capital first, that's going to give you more power and leverage in these negotiations. There
Mhm.
are some folks out there who don't have a big network, don't have, access to a lot of capital. What are some of the first steps you would take to help grow someone's access to capital and kind of grow and raise capital for deals?
So the first thing you need to do, the first thing I did, and the first thing I encourage anybody to do that wants to go down the capital raising game is get very clear on what your unfair advantage is. So your unfair advantage, your personal unfair advantage has to be where you start the whole conversation because ultimately when you're raising money, you need to come from a position of strength and authority and credibility and all that stuff. So getting super clear on what that unfair advantage is a starting point. So things like look, here's the thing. You don't need to have been a 20-year real estate veteran to have an unfair advantage. Maybe you were a medical doctor for 10 years and you have a big network of people that are high net worth. That's part of your unfair advantage. And you've been pitched everything under the moon because as a doctor, you get pitched all kinds of stuff, right? So that's an unfair advantage. Maybe you're a gardener and you had a landscaping business for 10 years and maybe you really know certain neighborhoods really well. Maybe you work for the city. Maybe you're involved with zoning. Maybe you've been a real estate broker for 20 years. Maybe you've worked in commercial sales and you're really good at negotiating. Whatever it is, all of us have an unfair advantage from whatever part of our lives that have brought us to where we are today with what we want to do. So getting very clear on that and those actual skills that you've been able to develop as a result of 10 years or 20 years of doing the thing that you've been doing, that is a form of an unfair advantage, and really leaning into that is a great starting point. Now if you have listeners that are like me when I was in my early 20s and I didn't have any thing but time. Time was my unfair advantage at that time. So I could just outcommit my time to solve the problem that I was having at that point because I had nothing else to offer but just sheer time. So, getting clear on your unfair advantage is number one. And then number two is building a narrative around that unfair advantage so that people start buying into you. Like your story is more valuable than the fact that you want to buy commercial plazas in Arizona. It's more valuable than, the fact that I want to buy mobile home parks in Louisiana. It's more valuable than whatever it is. That personal story is the reason why people are going to buy into you. And then secondly, they'll buy into your thesis, which becomes the other piece. And if you can just get clear on your unfair advantage and at least contextually why you're doing what you're doing, even if you don't have a deal or a team or any of those things yet, you can start to build some traction with people and people will start, you meet somebody and you're like, oh, she's interesting. He's interesting. I want to keep an eye on her. I want to keep an eye on him. And it's typically because you see something in that person that you want to see foster and develop. It's like the hero's journey, right? So, and as long as you guys remember that capital raising isn't this thing that you just turn on a Monday and get a check on a Friday, as long as you're building that mentality for the next 5 or 10 years, you'll know that it's an ongoing production. So that's where I would really start is getting, and it's not going to hit you like a bag of bricks all at once, being like, oh, this is my unfair advantage. Clearly, maybe you might have that, but for most people, it's something that you have to consciously almost develop over a period of time.
I love that, getting really clear on your unfair advantage and then making sure you can tell other people about it, right? Tell your story, highlight what it is you're doing, why you're doing it. That's going to
Well, and
allow
you
you to
can do it
stand
in a
out.
way where you add value. Like literally me, I got into PE, I've raised a lot of money, I've done a lot of things. So what makes me credible is my experience. And then when I can parlay that experience into a story that now serves your audience or other stages I speak at or whatever it is, people listen to things and they hear things that they can then use to improve their lives. They may or may not be my investors, but they're people that I can leave in a better place than I found them. And if you can do that time and time and time again with enough people, you will develop that relationship capital where you will start to find people that just they'll call, and I'm sure you've had this, John. They're like, where they genuinely mean this. Well, they'll say something like, whatever your next deal is, I'm in. And they'll literally just want to invest with you.
Yeah. I think too, your point there is that we all have an unfair advantage. Even if
100%.
you're broke right now and you don't know what to do, you may have time on your hand, right? Like you have your experiences. And one thing that's really great is we all have our own unique experiences, and that from that, we've learned some lessons, right? So that kind of gives you some things to consider and think about as you're starting to understand what is your unfair advantage and how do you share that with the world. The next phase is right. If you're starting out, okay, we figured out kind of our unfair advantage, you kind of have a framework, right, of how you approach raising capital. Talk to us about that easy framework.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the challenges that a lot of people have is so whether you have a deal or you don't have a deal, when you get on the phone with somebody, you have this almost diarrhea of the mouth where it's like you want to share everything you know about a deal or an opportunity or a market. And what ends up happening is you got to remember these people that you're trying to download into have not have not had the 30 hours of exposure to the deal or the market that you have. So trying to download that is really difficult. So I created the easy framework, and easy is exclusive, abundant, scarce in your allocation. So in the context of, let's say you and I are having a conversation, John, and I'm trying to figure out, if we can work together. I exclusive would be, tell me 3 to 4 things that really stick out about a deal or a market that the layperson can understand. So whether I'm a plumber, a doctor, or a garbage collector, it doesn't matter. Tell me 3 to 5 things that make your deal or your market unique. So here's an example. You could say, the building that we're under contract on, we've got it tied up for X dollars, which is half of what it would cost to build new. So half of replacement cost. That's interesting because everybody understands that things cost money to build and I'm paying half of that. Okay, cool. So that's one indicator of value. Another indicator is, the rents in the property are actually $800. The guy across the street, same building, same thing, is actually charging $1150. I can understand that. Another exclusive thing about that opportunity could be that the property is tied up for X dollars per door. Here's the appraisal, and we're actually $1 million under. So these are two or three things. Like, give me three or four tangible things that make it very clear that you found something of value. Now, if it's not a deal and it's a market, you might say something like, well, it's right on Main and Main. There's 30,000 cars that go by per day. Actually, Amazon just built a warehouse down the street. Like, give me two or three things that I can understand that makes what you're doing desirable, right? That's E. A is for abundance. So abundance means that you want to be able to demonstrate to a potential investor that you have options. So you've probably had this before, John, where somebody will call you and it's clear that they're expecting you to solve their problem. Like, they're expecting you to be the guy that writes the check that makes their dream a reality. So you never want to be that person that calls somebody with this expectation that they're going to be the person that makes this work. So how you avoid that type of scenario is you create abundance. So you have an abundance of people to talk to. So for example, if John, if you and I are talking, I'd say something along the lines of, well, look, it's good that we got on the call. I'm actually just about to send out this newsletter to my entire database. I'm just about to do this event. I'm just about to hop on this podcast. Whatever it is you want to be able to do, you want to be able to demonstrate that you have options for your deal, and you just thought of them because it was in the context of maybe a previous conversation or something else that they told you they were interested in, so that you're not coming out from this position of neediness. So the demeanor you want to have is, I'm doing this anyway. Do you want to come? Like, it almost has to be like, this is happening. You can be part of it if you want. And investors need to see that, because if you put them in a position where they're the ones that are going to make your dreams a reality, number one, you have no leverage. Number two, a lot of people don't want that pressure. So that's, so E, A, and then S is for scarcity. So there's two forms of scarcity. One is time. The reality is you have to close a deal by a certain day. That's a form of scarcity. And then two is the amount of capital that you need. So you may only need $500,000. You may only need $5 million. So I would say somewhere along the lines of the conversation. So John, my challenge is that my average investor is about $100,000 or 50, whatever your numbers are, $100,000. We're only looking for 500,000 on this, so I need probably another three or four people to work with. So again, you're making it tangible, real, and relatable to them. And then Y is your allocation. So at some point in the conversation, they're asking you lots of good questions. You're giving them context. You're answering questions, dealing with objections, whatever it is. And you might, at some point in the conversation, say something like, okay, so look, I'm going to send you the full package when we hop off the phone here. But if everything is the way you think it is there an amount that you'd consider investing in this? So, and again, you have to always say, I'm going to send you the full package, because no one in their right mind is just going to commit to something with no context, with no information, with a 20-minute phone call. No one's that good at sales. Okay. Like, or if you are, you still need the legal documents anyway. So the point is, I would say, okay, so John, I'm going to hop off the phone. I'm going to send you the full package. You could review everything we talked about. And if everything is the way you think it is there an amount you'd consider investing? And then they might tell you, yeah, and they'll always preface it with, if it is what I think it is, or if it is the way you say it is, I'd probably look at doing 100 or 200 or 50 or 250 or whatever the amount is. You say, okay, cool. And then the part two to that you could say is, okay, so why don't we do this? I'm going to send you the full package. You can take a look at it. I mentioned to you earlier, I've got about I've got about $500,000 left. You're thinking if it all checks out, you'd probably do 200. Why don't I set that aside for you for the time being? You can review the documents just to make sure that amount is available to you, because I still need to get back to a few other people in the meantime. And what you're doing is, you're letting them know that you'll set it aside for a period of time, and you're giving them all the documents. And again, you guys got to make sure you have a good data room, and your security is loyal. Like, make sure you have all your legal verifications, all the things in order. But you give them the documents, you set up a follow-up to review it. And then what I find a lot of times with our clients, a lot of them don't even need the follow-up call, because the data room is so good and it reiterates what I've already said, that all they're doing is saying, hey, looks good. Where do I send the check?
I love it. Marcin, you gave some great practical and tangible
Yeah.
specific steps. Great framework there to raise capital. Play it back, right? The easy method, EASY. The E is for exclusive. You want to highlight the value or the desirability of the deal, right? So demonstrate why this is a deal. Maybe that's some numbers based, maybe that's based on the market or location, but why is this a great deal? A is going to be abundance, right? This is you're not the only person we're talking to. There's other people we're talking to, other folks who are interested. We're going to share this with our audience, with our investor list. We're going to get this in front of other people, but I wanted you to have a chance to take a look at this, right? That S is for scarcity. So may seem a little counterintuitive going from abundance to scarcity, but the scarcity is of time, right? Time, and then also the capital. There's only so much money available for a deal. If you're raising $1 million, once you get that $1 million, it's not like you can just take everybody else that you want. So you got to
Yeah.
let these people know that, hey, we're going to move kind of quickly here. We also have a certain amount of money we're going to raise, and we're going to continue talking to people until we get there, right? And then that why is your allocation. So when you're talking to these individuals, if everything checks out, you want to understand and ask them, hey, how much would you consider investing if things match the way you expect based on what I've said so far? So great method there to raise capital for deals. That's the easy method. And we'll make sure we link to your website in the show notes. I know you got some great information there. Folks want to learn more, they can go to marcindrozdz.com. We'll put a link to that in our show notes. What can people find when they go to your website?
So marcindrozdz.com's got a lot of really good content information for people. We also have a free downloadable version of my Unlimited Investor Leads book, which was Amazon bestseller. There's a coursified version of it. It's free on the website. You can just log in, submit, and get the playbook there. So that's really useful. Videos, interviews, podcasts, case studies with our clients. We've helped a lot of clients. My clients have raised over 250 million to do over $1 billion in deals on top of the stuff that we've done, literally using our methodologies. Again, there's free resources, there's paid resources people want, but the point is, for me, this is like an art form. Like, I love the art of capital raising, whether it's real estate, or business. So if people are interested in learning how to level up there, there's a lot of really good resources for them.
We'll make sure we link to that in the show notes. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for later success.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we started with me telling you a little bit about my background. So when we did the initial 8-figure fund, one of the things we did is we also had we had limited vision, or I had limited vision. My regret from then, I don't have too many, but I do regret this, is that we were cooking pretty good raising the fund, and then we stopped because we thought that was enough. You raise 10, 20 million bucks, whatever it is, you're like, oh my God, right? Because buildings are 2 million bucks, 3 million bucks. My regret or failure, I guess, at that point was that I wasn't thinking big enough. Because if I'd really pushed it, would I got to 100 million? I don't know. But would I've got to 50? Probably. Would I've got to 75? I think so. And if we had just pushed beyond our own limiting beliefs then, that would have been a drastically different fund. I mean, we still did well. We still raised a fair bit of capital and bought a bunch of stuff. But honestly, it was just the failure there is I didn't think big enough. So this time around, it is going to be a 9-figure fund. It has to be a 9-figure fund because that's what it's got to be.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
So there's one of the most underrated hacks in this business is there's an app. I got to look on my phone, but where you can record the front and back of your camera at the same time. So you can pick one screen big, one screen small. I'll send it to you after. We can put it in the show notes because there's a few of these apps. But the reason why this is so powerful is because you can literally walk a property you're looking to buy or already own and just narrate a conversation about why you bought it, what you liked about it, why you walked away from it. And you can literally just text that out. Depending on how many investors you have, you can just ping them to them. You can do customized videos. During COVID, I started doing that because we were buying buildings from FaceTime, because you couldn't travel, you couldn't go anywhere, right? So I bought 82 townhouses, about 180 something units, and both of these things were from an iPhone, right? So we started using the double-sided screen as a way to actually then update investors, and B, be able to incentivize people to share it, because what would happen is then they would three-way other people with the video and introduce you to new investors.
I love it. Great one there. Give me the
Yeah.
book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Oh, the book I've gifted. I honestly, I got to get an affiliate relationship with this guy. His name's Ryan Holiday. He wrote a book. He wrote a few books. My favorite is called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and the subtitle is "What Is in the Way Becomes the Way." Brilliant book. It's rooted in something called Stoicism, which is the premise of nothing happens to you, everything happens for you, and it's a fantastic book. I I highly I reread it every year.
Love it. What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
Uh, Daily habit that my wife and I we started actually doing priming. So Tony Robbins has this thing that he talks about called priming, where you sit and you reflect and you link your physiological state with your mental state. You can literally look at the priming exercise on YouTube. Just type in Tony Robbins priming, and it's a 15-minute exercise. I can tell you right now, I felt silly doing it the first couple of times, just so you guys know, but it is true. The science behind it, the physiology with the psychology, it's fantastic. So, we got a little 2.5-year-old, so we try to do it as every day as we can, but some days just, brushing teeth wins, but we try to make that a habit in the house. So
Give me your number one insight for raising, and I'm going to say 9 figures worth of capital.
number one insight, uh, consistency, being consistent. Just honestly being consistent. Consistency in showing up, consistency in your story, consistency in your approach, just consistency. Because when you want to raise the kind of money that we're talking about here, consistency is going to trump everything. Because your first couple hundred grand, you're literally scrapping it out, and you're just trying to figure out a way to work your way through your day or your week. When you start raising a couple $1 million, you're starting to see some patterns. And when you get to that 8 or 9 figure mark, it's consistency, like creating consistency across all your business, all your communications, all your marketing. And it's something I always strive for. It's hard. It's tough. It's tough to be consistent in all areas of your business, but that would be probably the best advice I'd give you and myself at this point.
All right, last one. Where are you located right now?
Toronto, Canada.
All right, you are in Toronto. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Well, it depends if people are going to come look for me there. My favorite place in Toronto is a place called Harbor 60. Pardon me.
Harbor 60 sounds like a great
Harbor
place.
60. It's a steakhouse. It's right across where the Raptors play.
All right, all right. We check that one out. Have been back. I haven't been back to Toronto in man, I don't know. I feel like maybe 10 years. So I gotta get that on the list, man, and get back out that way. I love Toronto.
Yeah,
But
it's a
great
good spot.
stuff, man. You gave us a lot of great information. I loved hearing you talk about your journey getting into real estate from reading that little purple book and really just strong arming your way into the PE world, right? And just making something happen there. That story of ingenuity and just hustle really just I think it's really inspiring to think about what it takes to break in and just make something happen. But from there, being able to scale your own private equity fund, raising millions and millions of dollars for real estate deals, now launching $100 million fund, and giving us that easy framework to raise capital for deals. I think that's really helpful for all of our listeners. Again, if you want to learn more from Marcin, check out his website, marcindrozdz.com. We will link to that in the show notes. Thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
I appreciate it, John. That was cool.